Today's first page is from H.M.H. This is Aylin, my assistant today. Alright. My partner Therian and I fought constantly. We fought over whose Navi plotted hyperspace coordinates and whose Navi steered our ship dancer through the infinite. We fought over which one of us had to tell our boss about breakage and who got to fence the goods we'd skimmed. We even fought about Therian's affection for a certain deep-racked torch singer, although that was more about the currency my lover blew on him than anything else. We were pilots, after all. We thought monogamy was for 12 femme aristos and that weird cargo sect out near the Crab Nebula. So the first point that's a little bit unclear is in this sentence. I'm assuming that they're fighting over whose Navi is going to be used for which purpose, but the way it's written makes it sound like both their Navis have minds of their own and they don't actually know whose is doing which task, just because it's we fought over whose Navi plotted hyperspace versus whose Navi we'd use to plot hyperspace coordinates. So that's a very small thing, but it is, and I don't know, maybe these Navis are like AI that do things on their own. But I get the feeling that's not what was meant. So we'll see as we go on. Aside from that, the only problem I found was like little punctuation things with commas and stuff, which I don't want to talk about much on this channel. On to the second paragraph. Perhaps all that fighting, which we took for granted, was just a slow implosion, a breaking by degrees. I've been told the supernova at Alpha Centauri happened slowly too. That latest starfire had set the trigger for her cosmic atrocity long before the surface of those binary suns broke. The inhabitants of Rho were doomed for days, maybe weeks, but they only had 9 minutes from the sight of that first solar flare until their sky caught fire. 9 minutes. Alright, so I don't see any small problems with this paragraph, but there is a kind of larger issue. I'm gonna break this up so we can see all those sentences clearly individually in order to show this better. So we've got 3 sentences in this paragraph. Alright, so this first sentence has 3 commas in it. It's a 4-part sentence, so it's got a lot going on. The second sentence and third sentence are both pretty long. They've got a lot going on. This is a lot of comments. Of course, 9 minutes is its own little baby sentence. We'll just leave him alone. He's fine. But these 3 sentences are kind of long, multi-part, a lot going on sentences, all in the same paragraph. There's nothing wrong with a long sentence that's got a lot going on, but I tend to not want them all crammed together in one paragraph to explain one idea. And it's a cool idea. I like the image that's being created here. But trying to use this many words and this many parts and this many commas to explain this cool idea, I feel like is taking away from the image a little bit. I feel like we can make it a little bit more graceful if we shuffle some things around a little bit. We don't have to fundamentally change anything about this description. I think we can just work with it. So the first thing that I want to do is just a regular trim, just give it a little haircut. So anywhere that we can find places to just trim things without hurting anything. So like I've been told can easily been I've heard, which is the same thing. All right, the second place I can see to just do a little trim is here. We can and that was another small issue I saw in there, but I didn't know if it was worth fixing. So that just eliminates a couple little words long before the binary sun surfaces broke. Yeah, unless we want to sacrifice things, it looks like that sentence is the only one we can easily trim. So let's go back to the first sentence and figure out what we can do about this. Perhaps all the fighting, which we took for granted, was just a slow implosion, a breaking by degrees. Which we took for granted. I'm really not sure about this. I'm not sure what kind of implosion is upcoming with this person in Therian, but it's kind of sounding like Therian's the bad guy in this situation. I don't know. Like, which we took for granted is usually in reference to like a good thing. Like, we took all the good times for granted. Not we took all the fights for granted. Like, we didn't appreciate the fights. So not really sure that fits. So if it was me and that's the situation here, then I feel like I would just delete this, which would make this whole sentence easier to work with. But since we're trying not to sacrifice anything or change anything that the author has done. So let's look at the end of the sentence, which is two things that are saying the same thing. I feel like, do we need that? Like, it's done for effect, but is the effect you want? Oftentimes we do things for effect because we want that effect, but we're thinking about that effect at the sentence level and not like at the whole paragraph level within the context of everything else we've done here. My preference would be to sacrifice one of these and expand the remaining image. So let's just take out this one because implosion, you guys know I love my metaphors, so implosion goes better with the metaphor that's coming up with the binary suns. Alright, so then, but this doesn't seem like enough, was just a slow implosion, which is probably why the second thing was added. So let's build the image a little bit more. A slowly escalating. I feel like there's got to be a better word for like building here that goes a little bit better with this star metaphor. Perhaps all that fighting, which we took for granted, was just a slowly escalating implosion. All right, so that expands the image just a little bit, and takes out one part of that sentence, so it's only got 3 moving parts instead of 4. So I think that helps a little bit. Here, having the 2 kind of squirreled away in between those commas. And we're adding an extra word here, but we're taking out like a jarring little comma pothole. So another thing is that this paragraph, or these 2 sentences, are both talking about the same event that did happen in the past. Before the story present passed. And there's one instance there of past perfect, but the rest of it is written in simple past, which is a little funky. I don't think that we should be doing that. So we might want to fix that while we're in here looking at this other problem. So like this being in simple past is okay. I've heard the supernova at Alpha Centauri happen slowly as well. The latest starfire, and so here's the past perfect, had set the trigger for her cosmic atrocity long before the binary sun surfaces broke. The inhabitants of Rho were doomed for days, maybe weeks, but they only had 9 minutes from the site of the first solar flare. So why don't we just change this to had been doomed for days. That way we're just consistent within this story about the past and keeping that past perfect. So I'm generally anti-past perfect when you don't need it. Simple past is the past that you should be telling your story in. Like while you're writing, this is the story present. If you're writing in past tense, simple past is what you should be working with. But you do have to use past perfect every once in a while when you're telling a story about something that actually happened before. And this is something that actually has happened long before story present. Don't unnecessarily use past perfect, but also don't avoid past perfect when it's the appropriate time to use it, like when you're talking about something that actually happened a long time ago. All right, I think this last sentence is gonna have to do how it is. I can't think of any way not to hurt it or sacrifice things that the author has chosen to put in there. So we'll put the paragraph back together after we broke it and unhighlight it. All right, so moving on to the next one. Now that we've trimmed this up a little bit and taken out a section, at least now there's some variation within those sentences. We didn't trim it quite as much as I would have trimmed it if it was mine, but I think we've trimmed it enough that it's not as complex and it's a little bit more graceful. Not that there's anything wrong with complex, but having your images be clear and easy to see and having the complexity in the right spots, I think, is important. All right, so when Tharian and I imploded, it took me 5 to run. Some think I'm sun-touched, measuring my smuggler's life by the standards of the Milky's most hated war criminal. But these folks live under rocks. When you see a flashpoint planet-side, it's too late to stop the charge. By the time you think to run, you're already damned. All right, so I deleted some spaces up top so I could fit this on the page and we wouldn't have to cut off halfway through a paragraph sentence. All right, so the last thing I think I'm going to complain about as far as the small things go is this. But those folks live under rocks. So this is a very this time, this place expression that people use now in the real world. And the rest of the language in this page has actually been a really fun in the world in this future time period of space and stuff like the 12 fam aristos. You know, you've got little bits of lingo in here, like cosmic atrocity. So it's not everywhere else is not anywhere any one prose. It's all relevant and woven into the story. There's nothing sitting on the surface. except for this, but those folks live under rocks, which, doesn't really, like, are people still going to be using that phrase when we're traveling through space? My preference would be for some kind of world-specific, future time period-specific sort of expression here. Like, but those folks live in the peaceful outer systems or something, but probably a little bit more graceful than that. But yeah, so I'm just gonna make that small complaint that this is too here and now, which makes it feel like it's sitting on the surface of this story instead of being really woven into it with the time period and the environment and the situations. You just got so much cool lingo up here and stuff that's relevant to the story, and then but those folks live under rocks. That's the detail work for this one, so there wasn't much to complain about. Very clean. I will say that this paragraph is kind of chunky. We should probably do a break there. I've talked about this on Twitter a lot, but this width that's in Google Documents and Word and other writing programs, it makes it look like this paragraph is an acceptable size. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 8 lines, it's not that bad, but the width of a book is gonna be smaller. And so this is ultimately gonna look more like a 10 to 12 line paragraph, or possibly even more depending on what size book you print in. Like if it's a 5x8, it's gonna be like the whole page. So do try to keep that in mind when you're writing in these larger width programs, which do make editing easier. These having this much space makes editing easier, but also just keep in mind that this is gonna look, twice as big once you print it on a book, in a book. So I would probably break this paragraph up just a little bit. That also helps to vary it, but overall this was pretty clean, and there wasn't much to pick at here. It was a good introductory first page. It's not my favorite way to start out a story when you're talking about things that happen. Like, it looks like this gets more exciting here. This was kind of like a prologue, and I do always wonder whether that's the necessary introduction versus starting right here where it looks like we're going to get this actual story of the character who I still don't know anything about the main character, but the character in Therian, and they're falling out. Like, it looks like you actually get that, which I think would be a much better place to just start. Show them having a little fight, then show the 5-minute implosion, like when the supernova explodes for them personally. That would be my preference. Like, this is all well done as far as the narrative framing goes. It doesn't sound like the author is just telling us things. That's helped out by the fact that it's in first person. So I'm not saying it's terrible. It's only one page. Of course, only one page, again, with the width here. And the height, when you're looking at page length, when you actually print this, it's going to be more than one book page. But one Google document page is still not bad. So I would have preferred it to start here. I'm not like a huge narrative prologue fan, but this isn't bad as far as they go. As far as the wording goes, it is it's framed in a way that it doesn't just sound like an info dump or a backstory. It's got some personality to it because it's in first person, and the first person is done smoothly. There's not a whole bunch of I verb subject sentences, which would make it sound formulaic. So they did well in writing the first person, and technically they are calling this a chapter 1, and it looks like this is also part of the chapter 1, so it's not really a prologue, but in my guts I feel like it's a prologue. It feels like a prologue. You know, you can call it whatever you want, but it feels like a prologue. All right, so that's it. Thank you for joining me.